Good morning. It's time to go ahead and get started. If you're visiting with us, what we are doing in the morning is we're having kind of I guess we could call it a blended Bible class where we have the adults and the young people together, and we're covering this morning. We'll be looking in Daniel. We're probably going to stay in the first couple of chapters in Daniel. And normally, parents tell young people to not talk in the auditorium. That's sort of a rule. And so I'm going to ask you to break the rules this morning just for a little bit during this class. And so if you're not used to answering out, you can do that. If you have something you want to say, feel free to raise your hand. I'll try and ask questions, and we can get a dialogue going back and forth, and it'll be a lot of fun. So we're gonna be in Daniel. There are coloring sheets, and if you didn't get them, do you know where the coloring sheets are? They're in the back. If you didn't get them, let me know, and I will make one of my children go get them. They'd be happy to do that. And then we'll go ahead and we'll begin in Daniel chapter 1. So Daniel is about somebody named Joshua. Yes, exactly right. Yeah, we're going to follow a guy named Daniel. And he's got three friends who show up a few times in the story, and their names are Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, although later they will be called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And we tend to call them by their Babylonian names. And Daniel has a Babylonian name too. Does anybody happen to know what that is off the top of your head? It's a really cool name. Yeah, Belteshazzar. And if I was Babylonian, I would want to go by that. If I was Hebrew, I'd probably go by that because that's a good question. So how come, the question is, how come we know Daniel is Daniel, and Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, why do we refer to them as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? I don't know for sure, but I think the reason is because in all of the stories about Daniel, until you get to the end, he gets called Daniel. And it's not until about halfway through the book where he really starts to be called Belteshazzar. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego get called those names in the big story about them with the fiery furnace. And so I think that's why. I think you have all four of those men still trying to be Hebrew, and I'm sure that amongst themselves they probably went by their Hebrew names, but I think that's why. That's the only reason that I can think of why we know Daniel as Daniel, and probably also because the book is called Daniel and not Belteshazzar. And so if we had called the book Belteshazzar, we might call Daniel by his Babylonian name or Chaldean name. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, you're exactly right. People haven't changed, and I'm sure in ancient Babylon they were complaining about press one for Chaldean, right? And so people have always been the same. We don't like things that are different. We want everybody to be just like us. And when the Babylonians went through and they conquered people and they brought them to Babylon, it wasn't really okay for you to be Hebrew anymore or to be Median or Persian or wherever you happen to be. Now you had to be Babylonian, which means you're going to learn the Babylonian gods, the Babylonian language, you're going to learn all the Babylonian laws, and that's just sort of how people have been. When we beat you, it means that our culture is better than yours, so now you have to be like us. And we do that at school too. Have you ever done your hair a certain way, or maybe worn clothes that you didn't really like, but you wore those clothes because everybody else was wearing clothes, those same types of clothes? When I was in third grade, I think it was third grade, you know those slap bracelets that kind of came back for a little while? Those are they serve no purpose other than for the coating to come off and then you cut yourself with a piece of metal, right? That's the only purpose that those bracelets serve. But guess what I wore in third grade? Slap bracelets. Why did I wear slap bracelets? Because everybody else did. And when we moved to Tennessee, we thought that everybody was going to be wearing boots and cowboy hats. And I was going to be really happy. And we moved here, and it's like me and John and another John, and just a few people who wear boots. And so if you all could pick that up, and feel that peer pressure and start wearing boots. That would be wonderful. So the message for you younger people, for us older people too, is when you get to chapter 1, there's going to be a lot of pressure on these people to change. On Daniel, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, they're going to want them to change and become Babylonian. And I think that's a lot of what chapter 1 is about. Daniel lives in a foreign country now. He's been carried off. All of his friends are carried off. The Babylonian army comes in about 605 BC and takes people away from Jerusalem, and we think that that's when Daniel goes to Babylon. And when they're brought into Babylon, they're going to teach them all sorts of things about how to be Babylonian, right? And these are not Babylonian people. They're Hebrew people. They had special rules about how to dress. They had special rules about what to eat, about who to worship. And when they get thrown into this Babylonian society, none of those rules apply. So when you get to chapter 1, let's look at this. It says, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, he is one of the royal officials, to bring people of Israel, both the royal family, the nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance, skillful in all wisdom, full of knowledge, understanding, and learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literature and the language of the Chaldeans, the writings of the Chaldeans. In the ancient world, you had 2 types of writings that were typically read, right? You had court documents. So if you were a king, you would sit in your throne, and every once in a while you would tell somebody, hey, write this down. Or you had religious writing. Those are generally the 2 types of things that existed. And the reason why those are the 2 types of things that tended to exist, now there are also receipts, there are some other court documents and things like that, but the reason why those things tended to exist is because those are the only people who read. Right? You had priests who would read, and you had kings and royal court officials who would read. And other than that, most people couldn't read. And so those are what we tended to have. And so when this says that he was going to teach them to read and to write the Babylonian writings, he was going to teach them not only the Babylonian language, but the Babylonian religion. And that is a really big deal throughout the book of Daniel. There's constant pressure for Daniel and his friends to change who they worship, to change how they live. And what we see with Daniel is an example of what it's like to live in a foreign country and still be faithful to God. And here's the thing. You live in a foreign country. No, I don't. I was born here. How many of you were born in Tennessee? Raise your hand. Lots of people. Okay, how many of you were born in the United States? Most people. Not everybody, but most people. Why would we say the United States is a foreign country? Zane, have you lived here your whole life in the United States? Yeah. Deborah, have you lived in the United States your whole life? Yeah. Do you know what the United States is? Oh, okay. Cooper, have you lived in the United States your entire life? Yes. Then why would it be a foreign country? Where is your home? Yeah, God's country, with God. Right? So if that's where our home is, if our citizenship is in heaven, then that makes this place what? Not home. Yeah, a foreign country. So we are Daniel. I mean, not really. I mean, we don't have to call each other Daniel. But we're like Daniel. We're in the middle of a foreign country. We're in a world that wants you to talk like it, to act like it, to dress like it, to worship whatever it worships. And we have to make sure that we stay faithful to God in the middle of the foreign country. And now, if you've ever been to a foreign country, have you ever gone somewhere where people don't speak your language? What is that like? Is it scary? Yeah, have you ever been like maybe somewhere where people don't speak English and you have to go to the restroom and you don't know how to ask where the restroom is? That's, that's right. So all you have to do if you're ever in a foreign country and you don't know where the bathroom is, just kind of cross your legs and just do this. And people will go, oh, and they'll point you to where you go. If you're ever hungry, just rub your belly and people will go, oh, and they'll point you where to go. Okay? But Daniel is in a foreign country, and they're telling him he can't speak his language. They're telling him he can't dress the way he used to dress. He can't eat what he used to eat. And now if I were to go somewhere, if I were to go to Spain or Ecuador or someplace, and they told me, hey, you have to dress like us now, and you have to eat our food, and you have to talk like I talk, is that really that big of a deal for me? No. Does God tell me that there is like special clothes that I have to wear? No, I mean, they have to be modest clothes, right? But do I have to wear like unblended garments? Do I have to wear tassels on the corners of my garments? Is there a special hairstyle that I have to wear? No. But if you were Jewish, all of those things are true. You have a special hairstyle. You have a special way that you do your beard, if you have a beard. You have a special way that you blend, that you put your clothes together. You have a special style that you have to wear. And so when Daniel goes to this country, the king then is going to say, you can't dress like that, you can't wear your hair like that, you can't talk like that, you can't do any of those things. And so Daniel finds himself in the middle of a really big problem. Now, if everybody who came from Jerusalem, if all the people who came from Israel said, no, we're gonna wear our hair the way we're supposed to, we're gonna wear our clothes the way we're supposed to, would it be easier for Daniel to do the right thing? Yes. Now, what if all of us were carried off to another country and everybody in the room started acting like the people from that other country? We started doing our hair in the way that they do their hair in Brazil. We started wearing Brazilian clothes, eating Brazilian food, which I hear is very good, by the way. What if we started acting like that, but you didn't want to? Would it be easier or harder for you to be who you used to be? Have you ever been somewhere where all of your friends were doing something they shouldn't have done, and you wanted to say, wait, we can't do that? Is that easy or hard? Hard. So now imagine Daniel, everybody that he knows, his friends, his family, everybody who gets carried off into Babylon, they come here, and the king brings them, and he gives them the best places to live. That's really cool. He gives them the best clothes. He gives them the best food. All of these things are amazing. Now, if you've just been carried off, if an army came and beat your nation and carried you off, and you get brought to the foreign country, and you start getting everything you ever could have wanted, wouldn't that seem like a really good place to be? Like, what if Luxembourg invaded the United States? Right? It's not even a mid-sized European nation, right? It's really, really small. But pretend. Luxembourg invades the United States and takes you back to Luxembourg, and you get to live in the palace with the king. How cool would that be? You know, Cinderella's castle? That's kind of the place where the king of Luxembourg lives. What a cool place. Yes, 2 thumbs up, right? It would be really cool. The problem is, though, you have to act like them, and talk like them, and be like them. But you can't do that, because God has asked you to do something else. God has asked you to love him and serve him first. So that's where Daniel finds himself in chapter 1. The king is going to give them food, and Daniel is going to come to Ashpenaz, that chief official, and he is going to say, I don't want to eat the food. I don't want to drink the drinks that you're giving me. Now, we're not sure exactly why Daniel said that. It could be because those things weren't on the menu if you were Hebrew. Right? The Hebrews had some very specific things they were allowed to eat. If you were Hebrew, what are some things that you were allowed to eat? What could you eat if you were Jewish? Could you eat, yes. You could eat lambs, sheep, yep. How about goats? Could you eat goats? Have you ever had goats? No? Have you ever had goat cheese? It's pretty good. You should try it. Have you ever had, let's see, what else could they eat? Were they allowed to eat bats? No bats. Have you ever had a bat? Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. Anything that chirps and isn't a bird, don't eat. Right? Have you ever had snake? Ooh. That's actually pretty good. But if you were Jewish, you're not allowed to eat snakes. What about bugs? Have you ever eaten bugs? Like crickets? I've had crickets before. If you cook them right, you don't even know that it's a cricket. It's almost like a cracker. But right, if you're Jewish, you're not allowed to eat that. What about catfish? Fried catfish? Yes, 2 thumbs up. That's exactly right. Did you know if you were Jewish, you couldn't have fried catfish? Or shrimp? Or lobster? Or oysters? Blech. Right, so I'm on board with that one, right? But there were lots of things you couldn't eat. However, when we look at the food that we eat on a daily basis, how many of you like bacon? Ooh, if you want people to come over to your house, just cook bacon, right? But if you were Jewish, you couldn't eat bacon. Now, so you have never in all of your life, we're going to assume that you followed all the rules for the food, you have never in all of your life ever had bacon. And now you get carried off to this foreign country and they put you in a really big room with amazing beds and they give you all of the best clothes. And your first day there for breakfast, you come downstairs and you walk into the royal dining room and what do you smell? You don't know what it is, but it's good. And you go and you sit down and in front of you on this plate is a bat and some bugs and bacon. Right, probably not the bat or the bugs, but bacon for sure. Would you want to eat that? Yeah, yes and no, right? Yes, oh, it smells so good. But no, because you know God said don't eat this. And now at that moment, wouldn't it be really easy to say, well, I know I'm not supposed to eat it, but wouldn't it be really impolite to send it back? Couldn't it be rude? Wouldn't it make the king angry if I said I didn't want to eat his bacon? And all of a sudden, what you might start to do is you might start to come up with reasons why it's really okay. I mean, I know God said don't do this, but it's bacon. And it'll just be this one time. And maybe I can talk to them later and tell them I don't want to eat their bacon. And so you'll come up with all these reasons why you can go ahead and do what it is that God said don't do. When we're an adult, we call that rationalization. When we're younger, we might call it doing what I want. We can still call it that when we're an adult. But what we do is we start finding reasons why what God says doesn't really matter. And apparently a lot of people did that. But Daniel sat down and he smelled the bacon and he looked at the bacon and it was just as delicious as it is for you. But Daniel went and talked to the chief official and says, I can't eat the bacon. As good as it smells, as good as it looks, I'm sure it tastes wonderful. I can't eat the bacon. Because God has told me I can't. That could be why. Another reason maybe why Daniel doesn't want to eat the bacon is because in ancient cultures in Babylon, almost all of the king's food would have first been offered to a god. Have you ever had food that was offered to an idol? I have one time. I've had it given to me one time. I was over at a friend's house, and he was from India, and we were studying the Bible, and we were with some other people who were from India, and they had brought some food that had been offered to one of their gods. And now I have a question. Right now I have a problem. If they had not told me that this food had been offered to an idol, I could have eaten it, and it wouldn't have mattered. But we're here talking about the Bible, and I'm trying to convince them that none of their gods are real, and that there's only one God, and that Jesus is his son, who's been crucified and raised from the dead. And they tell me, here's this food that has been offered to an idol. Should I eat it or should I not? Well, you have to decide. But I had to tell them that I couldn't eat their food. Thank you very much. I'm sure it's wonderful, but I can't eat that. And so Daniel might find himself in the same position. He is worshiping God. He comes to Babylon. And now they're bringing him all this wonderful food that maybe he was allowed to eat. Maybe they didn't cook bacon. Maybe they just had lamb or goats. And they were bringing it to him, but he still has to deal with the fact that it's been offered to an idol. And Daniel might say, I can't eat that because it was offered to an idol. Well, whatever the reason, we're not told specifically what the reason is, but whatever it is, Daniel and his friends decided they weren't going to eat the food. And so they asked permission. Here's an important thing for us to think about. We might find ourselves sometimes in situations where we have to make a choice between following rules and obeying God. Now, what did Daniel do? Did Daniel kick the table over and hit people with the food and run out like a wild person? What did he do? He asked for permission to eat something else. That's important. We might find ourselves at some point in the future, I don't know what the situation will be, but we might find ourselves at some point in the future where we have to choose, are we going to follow the rules or are we going to listen to what God says? When you find yourself in that situation, I would suggest the first thing you do is ask for permission. Go and explain. Tell somebody what the situation is. Let them know, I can't do this, and this is the reason why. And here is a secret, okay? This word will change your life. Are you ready? I'm going to tell you a magic word. And it's not please and thank you. Those are the first magic words. This is another magic word. You ready? I don't know if I should tell you because it really is a magic word. Do you want to know the magic word? Yes? All right, you convinced me. Because. Because is a magic word. Don't you like to know why you're doing something? Don't you like to know why things are happening? When you ask for something, try this on your parents, right? Try it. Later, when you go home, ask for iced cream or a cookie or chocolate and say, Mom, I would really like chocolate because, and then give whatever reason you want. See, but now they know, so you're probably not going to get it. But if we hadn't been talking about this morning, that word because is magic. And if you say because, people will do what you ask. Right? Not all the time, but most of the time. They did an experiment where people were cutting in line. Do you like it when people cut in line? I hate it. I hate it when people cut in line. It makes me mad, especially when we're driving and people think they can just cut in line. And the reason why that makes me mad is because they don't say because. But they did an experiment where people cut in line, and they just went to the front of a line when people were at work, which people sometimes are already in a bad mood, and they went to the front of the line and they said, I need to cut because, and then they just said something silly. Most people were okay with it. So if you're ever in a situation where you need to ask for permission, let somebody know, I can't eat this food because. I can't go to this place because. And most of the time it will be okay. Sometimes it won't, but most of the time it will. And so Daniel goes to the chief manager here and he says, I can't eat this food because, and the leader there says, well, I don't want to get in trouble. And Daniel then has a plan. So here's another thing. If you are going to follow God, you have to think about what you're doing. You have to plan. Right? We have to think about how are we serving God? What are we going to do so that we can serve God? And we have to plan ahead of time. In our family, our whole week revolves around the times that we get together here. We plan for those things. We make sure that no other activities happen. If there is a soccer league that plays soccer on Sunday mornings, guess what we don't do? We don't play in that soccer league. If there is a chess club that meets on Wednesdays at 6 o'clock. It's called the Nashville Chess Club, by the way. If there's a chess club that meets on Wednesdays at 6 o'clock, guess which chess club we don't join? The Nashville Chess Club. If anybody from the Nashville Chess Club happens to be watching at home right now, please change your time. So we plan to serve God. And so when Daniel goes to the manager and he says, I can't eat this food, he doesn't just go with a complaint, he goes with a solution. I can't eat this food, and here's how we can fix it. So when we are serving God, what we need to do is not just look at, oh, this doesn't work, but also find solutions, also find ways that it can work. And so he goes and he says, let's have a test. For 10 days, we'll eat what God says we can, and for 10 days, you can feed everybody else whatever you want. So for 10 days, everybody else ate bacon. Have you ever eaten bacon for 10 days? Let's be honest. We've all wanted to eat bacon for 10 days. But if you did, how would you feel in 10 days? Happy, but probably not really healthy. Right? You'd probably be tired and want to sleep a lot because that's what bacon does. And if somebody was only eating fruits and vegetables and other healthy food for 10 days, how do you think they would feel? Happy and healthy and ready to go. Now, I don't know if that's the reason why. We're not told. We're just told that God gave Daniel favor, and I am more than happy to give God credit for Daniel and his friends being happier and healthier than everybody else. Whatever happened, God made it. And so that's another thing. When you're serving God, one of the things that's really easy to forget is that you're not serving God by yourself. God is working with you. I can't see God working with me all the time, but God is working with you. When the people in the New Testament went and preached the gospel and they were telling people about Jesus, God was working with them. When Daniel went to this official and said, I can't eat the food, God is with Daniel. Later, we're going to talk next week about the fiery furnace. When the three friends, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, are going to be thrown into the fiery furnace, who was with them? God, an angel of God. Right, so God was with them. Now, we can't always see God with us, but we can't forget that he is. And when you're in a difficult spot, when things seem hard, remember God is with you. And so Daniel and his friends, after 10 days, they looked healthier. And the leader said, you know what? You don't have to eat the king's food. You can keep serving your God. And so this is an amazing story. What we have here at the end, look at the end. Now these 4 youths, these people who stood up for God, not only were they able to keep their conscience clean. What does it mean to have a clean conscience? When you hear that, what does that mean? It's in some of our songs. Keep their conscience clean, right? So what does that mean? What is a conscience? Jiminy Cricket, right? All right, so besides Jiminy Cricket, what is a conscience? Yes. What? Oh, Nemo's dad, right. Yeah, we're sticking with the Disney theme here. So Jiminy Cricket, Nemo's dad, who's Marlin, I think is his name. What is a conscience? What does con mean? With, right? And science, what does that mean? Knowledge. With knowledge is what it means. Literally, that's what it means. It means with knowledge. And so your conscience is when you know the right thing that you ought to do. Right? There's something that you should be doing. Should you tell the truth? Yes? Should we tell the truth? Yes. And so if you find yourself in a situation like maybe there are cookies missing from the cookie jar because somebody in Bible class told you that you should have cookies this afternoon, and then your parents come in and they say, where are the cookies? Uh-oh. What do? Mr. Cuffle said, right? That's what you do. Mr. Cuffle said, what if you get caught eating something that you shouldn't have eaten? You get caught taking cookies from the cookie jar. We might want to not tell the truth to stay out of trouble. But your conscience says what? Tell the truth. You know you're not supposed to lie. So what should you say? Yes. Yes, that's right. Mr. Cuffle, right? Always blame Mr. Cuffle. That's what you should do, right? I ate them. I ate the cookies because, right? There's your magic word, because. We tell the truth. And so Daniel knew what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to serve God. So he made sure that he served God. And at the end of that event, at the end of those 10 days, Daniel's conscience was clean. He had done what he needed to do to serve God. And because his conscience was clean, God was with him, and all of these cool things are happening. And then look at verse 17. God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. One of the neat things in the Bible is that God takes people who are faithful and he helps them do amazing things. Right? The Apostle Paul, he wrote a lot of the New Testament, didn't he? It seems like he talked an awful lot to people. Lots of people became believers because the Apostle Paul went around and talked about Jesus. But when the Apostle Paul talked about his speaking abilities, he said, I'm not a good speaker. So how come somebody who wasn't a good speaker was able to teach so many people about Jesus? Why do we think that was? Maybe God was with him. Maybe God helped him. Moses, when God calls Moses and he says, Moses, I want you to go talk to Pharaoh. What are some of the things that Moses said? Yes. He said, I can't do it. Why couldn't he do it? Yes. Yes, he said the same thing. He said, I'm not a good speaker. And what did God say? What did God tell him? Yes, first God says, I made your tongue, Moses, just go talk. And then when Moses still says, no, I can't do it, God says, okay, fine, go get your brother. So God provided a way. And what we often find is that every time we want to make an excuse, God has an answer for us. Moses had a lot of excuses, and every time God had an answer, until finally God says, just go. And here, what we see in Daniel's life, the cool thing about Daniel is that in everything that happens, all the amazing things that are going to happen in the rest of the story about Daniel and his friends, it is God with them making these things happen. Daniel couldn't understand visions by himself. Daniel apparently didn't learn all these languages by himself. He didn't have skill in running an empire by himself. God was with him. And you know, one of the things that before I was a believer, before I was a Christian, one of the things that used to kind of annoy me was when an athlete would do something amazing and then they would say, I'm here because of God. You know what I used to think? You're not there because of God. You're there because of all the days you spent in the gym. You're there because of all the weights you lifted. You're there because of all the nutritionists who planned your meals. You're there because of all the coaches who helped you become better. But you know what? When I was in high school, I had people who helped me plan my meals. I had people who taught me how to do things. I had people who helped me lift weights. And guess how many professional football games I've played in? Guess. 5? I like you. Or were you going to raise your hand and say 0? Thanks a lot. 0 is the right answer. I wasn't really a football player, but 0. How many Major League Baseball games have I played in? Also 0. Also 0. How many times did I try to walk on to a college baseball team? 1 time. Once. I walked onto the baseball field, I saw the other pitchers, and I walked right off the baseball field. It didn't work out. Why? I don't know why. But God didn't help me do that. And so now that I am a Christian, now that I'm a believer, when I see people say, I could not have done this without God, I understand. I understand. I think I'm beginning to at least understand what it says here when God gave them these things. If it were up to me alone, if it was up to me to have the skill to read the Bible and try and figure things out and try and teach people, I couldn't do this. First of all, I'm not smart enough. And second of all, I really don't think that I was a good enough speaker. But I think that God helps. And God works with us. And he gives us understanding, right? James says, if any of you lacks understanding, what should you do? Ask. Pray. Right? We should do that. We should ask God to help us understand. Okay, so that's going to get us then to chapter 2. So Daniel and his friends get this wisdom and understanding, and now they can speak Chaldean, and that's really important because guess what King Nebuchadnezzar speaks? At least Chaldean. He may speak 2 or 3 other languages. Most people did. And so now we get to here, well, most like royal officials did. When you get to chapter 2, now King Nebuchadnezzar is going to have a dream, and it's going to trouble him. Have you ever had a nightmare or a bad dream, and you wake up and you're scared from it? And then somebody comes in, and what do they tell you? It's just a dream. Go back to sleep. There are things called night terrors that sometimes people get. Children often get them. Sometimes adults can get them. Have you ever had a dream where you wake up and the dream doesn't stop? If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about because it's terrifying. I had those as a kid sometimes. If you have night terrors, you tend to be somebody who sleepwalks. So if you sleepwalk, maybe you've had them. Stephen sleepwalks. I'll tell you sleepwalking stories later. So one day I woke up as a little kid and I was dreaming about a dog that was in my room and he was really mean. And I woke up from the dream and guess what was in my room? That dog. And it was really mean and it jumped up on my bed and I screamed. And my parents ran into my room because they thought something was eating me. I thought something was eating me. It was just bad all around. And my dad had to shake me and finally I woke up, and when I woke up the dog went away. Right? I knew the dog wasn't real. But Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that was apparently so vivid and so real that when he woke up and everybody said it was just a dream, Nebuchadnezzar said, no, it wasn't. And he called in all of the people who knew stuff, and he brought them in, and he said, I had a bad dream. I want you to tell me about it. And they all said, tell us about your dream, and we'll tell you what it means. Why do you think they asked what his dream was? They didn't know. Yes? Yeah. They want to know what he was dreaming about. Now, if I'm a wise man, yes, go ahead. Yes. So if I am a wise man and I work for a king and you tell me what your dream was, guess what I can do? Make up an answer. That's exactly right. If you had a dream last night and it was about snakes and chipmunks, I can give you an answer for what your dream was about. Now, if you come to me and say, tell me about my dream, there's no way I'm going to know you dreamed about snakes and chipmunks. I'm probably going to guess that you dreamed about taking cookies and that I got blamed for it. Right? So I don't know what your dream was unless you tell me. I can't help you get back to sleep. I can't give you an answer unless you tell me. And so when the wise men come in and they're like, just tell us the dream, Nebuchadnezzar goes, I'm smart enough to know what goes on because I've had all kinds of dreams before and you guys have always given me weird answers, but this is different. Tell me the dream. And none of them can. And so Nebuchadnezzar kind of throws an adult fit. We don't call them tantrums when you're an adult. We use more dignified language. We say things like, I lost my cool, or I was very agitated yesterday. All that means is I threw a temper tantrum. So Nebuchadnezzar kind of throws a temper tantrum, and he says, fine, if you can't tell me what the dream is, I'm going to make all of you go away. That's also a euphemism that adults like to use sometimes. So we get further down, and Daniel hears about it. And Daniel realizes that he and his friends are in a lot of trouble. And they are about to wind up very dead. So what do? Do they pack their bags and hurry and run away? What do? Who do they go to? They pray. Yeah, Cooper. Yeah, Daniel's going to go to the king. In fact, what a good answer, right? Because first they go to the king in prayer, and then Daniel goes to the king, right? They're in a really dangerous situation, and the first thing they do is pray. Now, to my shame, sometimes I find myself in really bad situations, and prayer isn't the first thing I do. The first thing I do is try and fix it by myself. And it's usually after that winds up being a disaster that I step back and go, okay, let's do this the right way now. And I will pray and then look for answers. And so Daniel and his friends pray, and God reveals the dream to Daniel. And in one of the coloring charts, you see what Nebuchadnezzar saw. He saw a giant statue. And in this statue, there were all different kinds of metals. And Nebuchadnezzar was really scared by this dream because the statue looks really impressive, but then a rock is broken off of a mountain, and it comes and it crushes him, and the rock then grows into a huge mountain. And what do we have? I don't know. Nebuchadnezzar doesn't know. But Daniel comes, and Daniel says, this is your dream. He describes the statue. He describes the rock not cut with human hands being flung and blowing the statue into a billion pieces. And then the rock grows into a mountain that covers the whole earth. And then he says, this is the meaning of the dream. These are different kingdoms. And you, O king, are the head of gold. And there's another kingdom that is the silver, another kingdom that is this, another kingdom that is this. And he goes through and he lists all of the different kingdoms. And then he says, however, there is a really big kingdom coming that is going to crush all the kingdoms, and it will cover the whole earth. What do you think that big kingdom is? It's the rock. Yes. What is that kingdom? Yes. The kingdom of heaven. Yeah, Matthew likes to call it the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of God. Paul will call it the kingdom of God's beloved Son. It's the place where your home is, right? Because if we go back, remember we live in a foreign country? It's your home. That's the kingdom. It's what we get to be part of now. And it covers everywhere, right? It doesn't matter if you live in Russia or China or South Africa or Brazil or Texas or Tennessee. You get to be part of the kingdom everywhere. No matter what language you speak, you get to be part of this kingdom. No matter what clothes you wear or what food you eat, even bacon, you can be part of this kingdom. And so that was this vision. And Daniel tells it to the king, and all of a sudden the king is kind of happy because he realizes that, well, hey, I get to be the head of gold. Things are going to go great for a little while, and I'll be long gone by the time everything blows up. Aren't you glad when you find out that you won't blow up? I tend to be happier then too. And so that's what we see in this great vision. As Daniel comes and Daniel says, there is a kingdom that is coming, and it will cover the earth. And Daniel, throughout the rest of the book, in fact, we'll talk about it later this morning, Daniel is going to see more and more and more information about this great kingdom and the king who is coming. So Daniel is going to learn more about Jesus. And so when we come to these stories, when we read through the Old Testament, next week we're going to look at chapter 3 and we're going to look at chapter 4 in Daniel. When we come and we look through these stories, these great moments in human history, all of them are pointing us toward who? Who do you think we're being shown ultimately? God is a good answer. It's the right answer. It covers all your bases, right? Who is the coming king? Yes. Jesus. Yes, we're being shown Jesus. God knows, thankfully, that I'm not smart enough to figure everything out all by myself. I have to be shown things. In fact, I have to be shown things usually 5 or 6 times before I finally understand them. And so all throughout the Bible, God has been telling people that Messiah is coming. That's Jesus. Then when Jesus comes, God tells us, here he is. And now that he has come, God says, that was him, and he's still here. And so that, in a nutshell, is what we'll be looking at next week and in the coming weeks. Jesus, his coming kingdom, and all of the amazing things that God is doing for us. Thank you so much for being here this morning, for all of your answers, and for your attention. We'll pick up next week in Daniel chapter 3.